Script blocks here. Today we're going to recreate a Stardew Valley machine in Godot. Let's get started. Alright, to begin with, we have our scene here. And in our project, we have 4 textures. So we're going to turn off the filter on the Blender one. On machine output bubble, we're going to turn that off and re-import it. On the mixed drink, we're going to re-import it as well. And then on the floor, it's a little bit special. We're going to turn on repeat, so it's make it enabled, and we're going to import it. That way we can stretch it across the screen. All right, so let's make a new scene here. We'll call it, let's call it main. And we're going to add a sprite to it. Call it floor. And then we're going to use the floor texture on it. And this texture, we're going to tile it up for it to be 256 by 256. So the texture itself is, I believe, 32 by 32, but we want to stretch it out to 256 by 256. So it's already there. Let's put it back to 256. There we go, so we can see the numbers. Now we can either do offset or we can do transform. Let's do transform. And we're gonna put it so that it's in the middle of the screen. So we're gonna do, since it's half the size, we want to do 128 by 128. And then let's go ahead and save the scene, main, save, run it. Oh, first we need to set the settings of the screen. So we'll scroll down to window. The width we'll do 256 by 256. This is the size of the viewport. And then what it's going to visually show on the screen is 1024 by 768. And then we want to set our stretch mode to 2D. Okay, now if we run it, we select this one, we say the main scene, we say open, and we have our texture for our floor. Okay. Next, we're going to make another 2D scene, and this is going to be the machines. We'll change the name to machine here. And then we're going to add to the machine some sprites. The first one, we're going to call it body. The next one, we're going to call it bubble. It's the little bubble that pops up on top of the machine. And the next one is item. And this is going to be the item that pops up inside the bubble. And we're going to need a animation player. And we're going to need a timer. Right, we'll put these in order a little bit here. Okay. That should be fine. And for the body, we're going to set it to Blender. For the bubble, we're going to set it to the texture to bubble there. And then for the item, we're going to set it to mixed drink. And these are just so we can visually lay it out as we're designing it. Later on, we'll import them in based upon the main scene. So put the bubble on top of the blender here, and then we'll put the drink inside. And since the bubble and the drink are the same size, we're going to go ahead and make the bubble, scale it up to a little bit bigger. Let's see, could do 1.2, 1.5, that might be too big. Yeah, that's way too big. Let's probably do 1.1 and 1.1. Not perfect, but that'll do. Okay, now we kind of have our scene set up. We can go ahead and make our first animation. We'll call it on. So this is when the blender is turned on. So we go to our body, and we're gonna first do our first frame as scaled at 1, and then we're gonna go over half a second, and then we're gonna scale these up to 1.5. Is that too big? Well, and then 1.25 for the Y. And then we're gonna put a keyframe there, and then we can copy this keyframe over to the last one. And we'll just keep it as continuous. If we play it, see it goes a little bit. It's bigger and smaller, and then we'll go ahead and make this a looping animation. There we go. Next, we'll do the off animation, which is super simple. We're just gonna do one track, and it's just setting it back to 1. And we're not gonna have it loop because we don't need it to. All right, let's save the scene. Call it machine. And now we want to add a script. Oh, but right now we're on body sprite, so we want to move it to machine, the top level. There we go. Default template, no 2D, the basic stuff. Create, get rid of this comment. Get rid of this other comment up here. All right, now we need to make some export variables. So the first one we're gonna do is the machine texture. So this variable will hold which texture we're going to use for the machine, or the machine body. The next one we're gonna do is the output item texture. This will be what pops up at the top. And we're going to have a variable that says how long the time will take for the machine to run before it pops up. And we're going to default it to 2 seconds. Now we need some onReady variables. We need one for the timer. So we'll use our little shorthand, which is $timer. And that timer there represents the timer there in the outline. And then we need one for the animation player. Do the shorthand as well, animation player. Next, we're going to do another onReady variable. This one is for output time. I'm sorry, output item. And it is a sprite. And it represents that item over there. And I didn't type it, so let's go back here and tell the variable what type it's going to be. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to put this here, but it helps the text editor know what to use when you do like code complete and stuff. So bubble is also a sprite, and the shorthand, and it represents the sprite called bubble there in the outline. All right, so now we have our variables. Get rid of this comment. Get rid of this pass here. All right, so we're going to get the sprite body. We're going to set the texture to whatever texture is been assigned to that export variable. The variable at the top. And then we're going to do output item. Actually, let's do output item texture equals to the output item texture that we defined. And then we don't want the output item to pop up at the beginning, so we're going to set it to false so the user can't see it. And then we're going to do the same thing for the visibility of the bubble as well. And then we're going to do timer, and then we're going to set how long the timer is going to wait before it finishes. So it'll start the timer, and then it'll say how many seconds go by. And so whatever we passed in as the process time up in our export variable, that's what it'll use there. And then we have we're going to connect the timeout to this script and then to the method that we're going to create in a second, and we'll call it on timer timeout. And this is connecting it through code, but you can also go to the timer here, go to the node tab, and then click on this timer output there and fill that one in, and it'll have the same effect. But I just like to do it in code because it's kind of easier to remember where it's at. And then for the animation, we're going to start it on the off animation. So the animation where nothing's moving. Okay, now we need to find our function. Let's call this one turn on. And inside of that, we're just going to say timer start. So it starts the timer. And then animation play, and we're going to do on. And that's the animation where it gets bigger and smaller, bigger and smaller. Okay, and then we'll go ahead on the ready method, or the ready function, to call that turn on we just defined. So it's going to turn on, play, and then it's going to start getting bigger and smaller until the timer stops. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and define the on timer timeout. And all we want it to do is we can see the method that we're calling here. So the connect method, that value right there is what we just defined. And in here, we're going to play the off animation. So it's going to go from on to off when it hits the end of the timer. And then we're going to make the visibility of the item true, and we're going to make the visibility of the little bubble true as well, so it'll pop up on top of the machine. Okay, so those export variables we defined are the machine texture, the output item texture, and the process times. That's what we can drag into there to define it if we wanted to use different textures than what we currently have. So if we play this scene, we'll see that we don't see anything because we didn't define the machine texture or the output item texture or the process. Well, we did. The process time has a default value, but the other two don't. So if we go back to our main scene, and we will link an instance of the machine here, and we'll play it, and we can also see that nothing is shown because we still don't have those variables defined. So in this instance of the machine, we're going to set the machine texture to the blender, and then we're going to set the output item to that mixed drink, and then we're going to set the process time is currently at 2. So that item, that bubble, so those three variables right there that we exported are the ones that we're filling in the texture with when it starts up. So if we start it up, we can see it pulsating for 2 seconds and then pop, and there goes the item. All right, so since we did it as a inherited scene, we can go ahead and duplicate it a few times. And then we can, let's move them around so they're not stacked on top of each other. Can leave 4 where it's at, and then 5 will move over here. And then for these different machines, we can set the timer to be different. And if we wanted to, we could set the item texture to be different. So we're on machine number 1, and we're going to do it for 1 second. And then machine number 5, we're going to do it for 5 seconds. Okay, and the other ones will still be at 2. So if we run it 1 second, that one pops up. 2 seconds, and then when 5 seconds are over, that one will pop up. And then let's say, I didn't add another texture here, but we can use the default Godot one. So if the 5th machine, when the 5 seconds are up, right, instead of showing the mixed drink, we're going to show the Godot icon, which is a pretty massive icon, but you'll get the picture. Boop, boop, boop. And there you have it. Hope you liked this video. Please subscribe.